All right, we always talk about the wall that Donald wants to build and how the Mexicans are going to pay for it. Well, believe it or not, he put out a position paper where he explained how he would get our friends from south of the border to pony up the money necessary to build said wall. Trump said that he would stop Mexicans here from sending money back there. Then he would take those billions of dollars in remittances and he would use the cash for construction of the wall, or he'd accept a one-time payment from the Mexican government. Now, as Trump remains fixated on Mexico, we are looking ahead to the New York primary, which is 2 weeks from today. The Donald has commanding a lead in his home state, according to 538's polling averages. Cruz in a distant third place. That shouldn't surprise anyone. Remember when he attacked those New York values? I'm going to get to that in a second. But first, let's talk about the wall and Trump for a second. Again, if anyone reads it, you don't even have to be a first-year law student to say, wait a second, how does he legally stop someone who's a legal citizen from sending money back to Mexico? There's no law that permits him from doing any of these things. Forget about the impracticality of it. And then, by the way, he's going to deport them all, but they'll still be sending money from... I don't want to get logic into this conversation. It's not fair to logic. But my point's a different one, Scott. Either he wrote this or somebody wrote this. It's insane. Forget about where you feel about immigration, good, bad, or indifferent. It's completely nonsensical. And that's the part that boggles my mind. It's not him extemp on a mic. He had to write this 1,000-word treatise, right? And beyond frightening, it's disturbing.
No, it is. But it's the same, perhaps the same guy who says we should withdraw from NATO now that Russia's taking over Europe.
But again, he's talking ad lib off the mic, okay? And he doesn't think before he speaks. He had to write this thing out.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right, though. I think he probably wrote it himself and thought it was the most brilliant thing he'd ever seen, which is what he does. But it is impractical. But I don't know about you or the viewers, but I just don't listen to him anymore. I mean, when he says, I'm not going to become presidential until I become the president, it tells me he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Because everything you say as a candidate does have repercussions, and whether you can do something or not matters. He can't do this. I mean, there is a law which talks about illegal immigrants, which he may be trying to focus on, but I'm not sure he even gets that part.
It boggles the mind, and I've heard a theory that only somebody who's trying to lose would be doing the things that he's doing. And while you laugh at that, if you sit back for a second, is he trying to lose? Why would he do any actions he's taken the last 2 weeks? Listen, whether you like him, you hate him, you think he's vulgar, you're not, he obviously found an element of this population enough that he's clearly the favorite among the Republicans in the field. Whether we like it or not, he is. But he's done everything seemingly possible in the last few weeks to just become either unhinged or unlikable.
I don't think he's trying to lose. I think he's out of his depth, and he's being exposed for that now. He had a great idea for the populist movement and for getting the crowds behind him and getting the initial support. I don't think he gamed out this next step where you actually have to come up with tangible, viable solutions that can actually work. And there's one theme through all of these things, the Mexican wall or the NATO payments, or even Roger Stone, the pinky on his right hand, now threatening delegates going to Cleveland by saying, well, I'm just going to publish your room number and let everybody know where you're staying in Cleveland if you wind up, suggesting that you're not going to support Trump. It's bullying, and it's a protection racket. Hey, nice country you got here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it, which, as we know from his business career, is kind of his MO. That's kind of the way he operates.
Well, the most fascinating thing really is the folks who will support Mr. Trump have to this point, if you will, because of what he said or in spite of what he says, right? It's hard to know when you listen to their opinions, but it does illustrate the fact that, again, people are so incredibly angry, frustrated, feel betrayed by what's been happening over the past 8 years.
The Border Patrol Union endorsed him, okay? Taxpayer-funded dollars, by the way, but they endorsed Trump this week. All right. I do want to talk about another guy, and because we are next here after tonight in Wisconsin, meaning New York, Ted Cruz. okay? Do you remember, it wasn't too long ago when Ted Cruz attacked New York values? Well, forget me, you, and everyone else. Republican Congressman, former colleague of Nan's, Peter King, sure did. The Long Island Congressman, Republican, had this to say about the Texas senator. I am convinced and know that he's a fraud and a hypocrite, coming to New York and basically begging for money from the so-called rich people that he attacks, talking about New York's lack of values when New York was the inspiration for the country. All Americans were New Yorkers after 9/11. And that's not all. Cruz, if you don't remember, and I do, he voted against the Zadroga Act, and not just once. And for those who don't remember what exactly that did, it would have provided and finally got passed medical care to 9/11 first responders, the people who ran into the rubble after the buildings came down. He also voted against FEMA funding for Sandy relief, even though he supported flood relief funds for his home state of Texas. I can say and I can do an hour without taking a breath on Trump and all the unconscionable things he is, but Nan, the idea that Ted Cruz would have the audacity to come to New York and say he's the best Republican for the state of New York, I find more than objectionable. I think it's offensive.
Well, I think it is for New Yorkers, and I agree. You just laid out the case for why those of us who live here and love this state and have to practice the Republican philosophy here, find what Ted Cruz has said to be deeply troubling. Now, interestingly enough, he's going to all three of the remaining Republican candidates are going to the Republican dinner, which is upon us very shortly. But I know when I think Ted Cruz was speaking at the Conservative Party dinner last year, and a lot of people did not want to go anywhere near it. He's willing to take unpopular positions in states. He did so in Iowa, and I gave him credit for that. He came out against the ethanol subsidy in Iowa, and the ethanol subsidy is a bad thing. It's a bad thing for the people of the United States. But I don't think you can argue that the Zadroga Act, which was compensating people who were responding to an act of terrorism against our country, somehow would have been an inappropriate thing to
FEMA.
support.
It's
and
okay for Texas,
FEMA,
but it's not for New York.
Exactly. That's just hypocritical. So.
You know.
Oh, chameleon.
Please.
He plays, whatever stage he's on, depending on what the color is in the back, that's what he is. Kasich all the way.
Remind me what Ted Cruz's wife does for a living?
Oh, yeah, Wall Street.
She works for Goldman Sachs. Where is that located? It sounds, Rich, like you're endorsing John Kasich in the New York primary, at least on the Republican side.
Well, you know what? Republicans are going to have to take a long look in the mirror as to how we got to where we are right now. There's going to be a postmortem certainly long after this, and it'll be a complicated one. But if you had an alternative like Kasich, and I don't agree with all his policies, but at least he's sober-minded and he's not a fraud, like for me, Cruz is. Trump, whatever he is, you know where he stands on something. Cruz will turn around in a heartbeat, and if it's politically advantageous to him, he'll shut the government down here and then laugh all the way because he got his free press and leaves others like you to clean up the mess after that happens. So for me, he's as bad, if not worse, than even Trump. And I just hope New Yorkers, when they consider who to pull the lever for, consider everything this man has said about their state before the day.
Ted Cruz is not going to do well in New York.
No, he's third place
I
for
could be
sure.
fourth out of three.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. No, he's not.
All right, coming up next, we pivot to the other side. We will go live to Brooklyn. There's a Hillary Clinton town hall event here. She trying to maybe after a tough night in Wisconsin, lay the groundwork for a solid return in New York 2 weeks from tonight here. We could be getting a first look at the strategy she's going to use against Sanders as she tries to finally shake loose of it.